Afternoon all. Many thanks for joining this afternoon. So today our subject is safe and efficient manual handling, and we've kindly got Simon Love along with us today, our national chair of the National Back Exchange and director of LPS training. So for those of you that don't know me, my name's George Holbert and I'm the sales director here at Yorkshire Care Equipment. So just a little bit as to, if you're joining for the first time, apologies for those who've heard it all before. Who are we at Yorkshire Care? So we've been established 49 years, our 50th birthday next year, which we're all excited about. But really we've built up the business over a long time now with a mission to enhance quality of life. So really important for us is to everything that we're doing, everyone that we touch, to improve quality of life. And we use a lot of health professionals around the country, occupational therapists, physios, and so on. And we carry out a lot of home assessments in where people are unable to get to us. We can bring equipment to them. So I thought I would just run through one or two bits of equipment, which I believe, just going back to our title of presentation today, so safe and efficient manual handling, where I believe manufacturers have really taken thought and taken that into account when developing equipment. So just briefly, and before we start on Simon's main presentation, but the Razor as one is a lifting device to lift somebody who's fallen on the floor. There's minimal manual handling involved to actually set this up around a patient who's fallen, and it's safe for one carer to bring the fallen person back into a safe stand. Now, another really unique product that we supply is one called the Vela chairs, Vela activity chairs. So you'll see here we've got selection of pictures, so showing somebody doing washing up or ironing or loading the dishwasher, but because of its adaptability and adjustability, it can set you at the right height, right angle for carrying out the activities. So you're not having to bend over or lean backwards, lean forwards, and so on. Just worth pointing out a function available on quite a few of the chairs, particularly the rise and recliners, that you can get a vertical rise on the chairs. So particularly for the caregivers delivering patient care, so it might be putting a cannula in, or it might be somebody who's suffering with edema and needs treatment and so on. That again is a great feature. So particularly for the caregiver, where you're not having to bend over, strain your back when delivering care. Another one, these are just sort of picked up random, but one's really that stuck out to me. So a power pack. So when it comes to pushing your relative or husband and wife, so on, up or down hills, involves quite a lot of strain. You've not only got the weight of the person in the chair, but you've got the weight of the wheelchair as well. Well, a power pack can assist in that respect to really ensure, safe and efficient manual handling. And then just lastly, increasingly so, the manufacturers are bringing out quite a few carbon fiber products, which, as we know, are incredibly lightweight. So this one shows a 4-wheel walker, which is just 5 kilos. So for somebody who needs the assistance of a relator, will often be the one who's having to lift it maybe into the back of the car. And fantastic, really, that they can manufacture such lightweight products. So that's it from me. A warm welcome to Simon. I appreciate everybody taking their time this afternoon, and welcome, Simon. I'll take my
Thank you very much, George.
piece down.
Right, you should be able to see a PowerPoint there. George, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see that? Brilliant. Okay, guys, I was rather hoping I might see some more festive attire. I have to say I'm slightly disappointed, but something's coming out. Well done, Anthony. There we go. I feel more Christmassy already. Look, I have made a great effort. I've got a little thingamajig on my jacket, and If I sound a little bit hoarse, it's because I had a lateral flow test yesterday, which was positive. So feeling a little bit ropey, but anyway, hey, here we go. So smart and efficient handling. And I'll just go through to the next slide. This was the picture that was on your flyers in the email that came from Yorkshire Care. And if you think about the person's posture who's about to assist the person out of the wheelchair, you may think, well, that's not a very good picture, actually, because that doesn't look very smart and efficient. Well, thank you, Yorkshire Care, for bringing up a very important point. You only need to be smart and efficient if you're generating a reasonable force. And the more force you want to generate, the more smart and efficient you really should be. So this carer is bending over slightly. She's in a slightly twisted posture. Do I really mind? No, not really mind, because she's about generating the same force as she might do if she picked up a briefcase or a handbag or a file. So does it really matter? No, I don't think it does. So that was an interesting starter. For those of you with us for the last talk, just as a reminder why we're talking about smart and efficient manual handling. I delivered some information about some more recent research, which definitely shows that back pain is multifactorial, without a doubt, and lots of things go into how much pain, not just back pain, but any pain you may experience. Genetics, different sizes, types, genders, life stages, whether you're adolescent and growing or you're decrepit, as I am, getting more and more decrepit every year. So getting older, going through the menopause, that sort of thing, pregnancy. System changes is where the system become highly hypersensitive to pain if you've had a lot of chronic pain. And the most important one is the belief system that you have. And the whole essence of these two talks is to try and get away from the normal teaching that if you don't do manual handling this way, you're going to damage your back. Because that, in fact, is incredibly harmful, potentially, in the long run. Because if you believe you have back pain for a reason, so somebody's giving you a reason why you've got back pain, you have reason to believe you've got back pain. And that is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you're just going to go round and round and round in that circle. I'm just going to admit somebody in here. So that's where we were at. So that's why we don't talk about you must do things in manual handling this way or you'll injure yourself. That's one of the main reasons why. So back to smart and efficient manual handling. George gave you some solutions, some equipment solutions, which may enable you to be smart and efficient manual handling. However, before we go any further, before you can understand the basic principles of smart and efficient manual handling, you need to have an understanding a little bit about how the body works. And without getting too complicated, there are two main force systems which are generated within the body. One is dealing with your weight, because your weight passes through your body to reach the ground. We know that, that's absolutely obvious. It's not quite so obvious, actually, and it's quite subtle. Because if you were standing on a set of scales, it would weigh your total body weight. It would weigh everything that you were wearing if it was in contact with you. It would weigh an earring. It would weigh a gold tooth filling. We've had a really sensitive set, an uber sensitive set of scales, it would weigh everything. So if I've got a pair of glasses on at the moment, the glasses, if I was on a set of scales, would be still weighed on the scales, correct? If I took my glasses off, but kept hold of the glasses, would the scales change, or would I weigh exactly the same as I did before? I would weigh exactly the same. Nothing would have changed. If I clip my glasses up and stick them on my shirt, would my weight have changed? It would remain exactly the same. The only time that force generated by the weight of the glasses would alter is if I took the glasses off and rested them away from my body, not in contact with my body. So in fact, it's quite interesting how your weight will reach the ground. And one of the reasons why I'm talking a little bit about this is some of the principles are dealing with how to best deal with your body weight and the force that generates. So that's one thing. The second force system we need to be aware of is the force generated by your muscles, muscular activity. I think everyone's familiar with that. If you want strong muscles, by the way, you need to lift heavy weights. So there are some times where you want to put a lot of stress and strain on the muscle for a particular reason, and that's to generate more muscle mass. You may want to do that. but not particularly smart if you're doing that for a long period, or it's really sustained, or you're generating a lot of force with the muscles. And the thing about the muscles is most of the time we're going to use our hands and arms to do things. We are prehensile. That's what we are. As soon as we ended up on two legs, we became prehensile, and everything was grabbing with the hands. Whenever you start to generate any force with your hands or your arms, it doesn't stop there. There's a complete domino effect all the way down the body of stabilization, co-contraction. All the muscles of the trunk need to be contracted to keep the shoulder stable, and then the muscles of the pelvis need to contract to keep the pelvis stable. And there's a knock-on effect all the way down. The only time that knock-on effect stops is when you lean against something. That's when that knock-on effect of that stabilization knock-on effect will actually stop. So the muscle system we're pretty familiar with, I think, but not quite so aware maybe of that knock-on effect which carries on all the way through the body. So first principle is to have a balanced spine. So what I mean by a balanced spine is that your spine, I hope, doesn't look like that. If it looked like that, you'd have something horribly wrong. But those stones are all balanced. Therefore, they're not having to do anything. There's no force being generated by the muscles because they haven't got muscles. So if your body was balanced, if your trunk was balanced, and we have a look at the example here where you've got the body there, we've got the nice curvature of the spine, we've got the person standing up, and the whole weight of the trunk. Oh,
sorry, Simon, I think you need to share your screen again.
Do you know, I'm so glad you said that. I did ask him to butt in if I was doing something really stupid. So thank you very much, Tristan. That's really helpful. So maybe we'll go back a slide. Oh, no, I won't. There we go. I was talking about the balanced spine. I was talking about the stones, which you didn't see, but it is a beautiful picture. So I bet you're really glad I've started to share my screen now. It's a lovely picture with a bit of a harbour and sunset and one thing and another. If the stones are balanced, nothing has to happen. So that's interesting. So if your body is balanced, your trunk is balanced, so the weight of the whole of your trunk is balanced squarely over your hips, nothing has to happen. And that means that the work of the muscles will be reduced significantly if your spine is balanced. And it's remarkable if you actually get, if you work as a pair, we've got Joanne is there with somebody, but if you get the opportunity after this, just to have a little bit of a play. So if one of you is to stand up and the other person stand right behind them and rest your fingers in the middle of the back muscles, and somebody was balanced, the muscles would be completely relaxed. As soon as they bend forward very slightly, then the muscles will generate a lot of force very quickly. It's actually quite surprising. Is that going to harm you? Is that going to damage you? Is that going to cause injury? If you're bending over a bed, for instance, for 2 or 3 minutes, the answer is no. No, it won't. It may make your back ache a little bit, which may be unnecessary. You may be generating unnecessary force, which may not be very efficient, but it's not going to cause you any injury or any damage. And interesting, when I go around and I observe care staff working on height adjustable beds, and the bed is height adjustable, obviously, and they just don't get it at the right height, and they have to bend forward because they've raised it up just a little bit but not far enough, whereas if they were balanced, then they'll be more upright and the muscles will be relaxed. It's just a more relaxed, more efficient way of doing it. Lots of people ask, okay, should the taller person or the shorter person, should you adjust the bed to their height, taller or shorter? And the answer is very often it doesn't matter, because anthropometrically, your ideal working height is elbow tip. And if you've got two people of different heights stand together and raise your arms up, so your elbows would at a right angle, the hands would be probably at a pretty similar level. It's a bit of a misconception. Unless you have a real extreme difference in heights, in which case it may make a difference, I would recommend that you have a compromise. So you don't have the taller person bending forward too much, and you don't have the shorter person raising their arms up too much, which can cause problems that way. So try and get balance if at all possible. Doesn't matter, it doesn't mean you're going to harm yourself if you're not, but perhaps just smarter to work that way. So next principle is to adopt a step stance. And Tristan, I hope you'll remind me if I fail to share my screen again when I move the slide on. Just shout up, that would be great. Step stance is the stance that everybody gets in if you're going to do any martial arts, any combat sports, boxing, karate, whatever it may be. Everyone starts in a step stance position, 1 foot forward, 1 foot back. So the advantages of being in a step stance are twofold. Firstly, it means that your line of gravity, so you've got a center of gravity, don't want to get too complicated, but your center of gravity rests just about on the front of your tummy. That's your center of gravity. Your line of gravity, if you dropped a vertical line from that point, it would hit the floor somewhere. That's your line of gravity. If you're in a step stance, you can move your line of gravity, you can move your body weight forwards and backwards and sideways without that line of gravity falling outside the footprint of your feet. Therefore, you remain balanced. And the consequence of being unbalanced is we don't fall over. Well, we do, but it's rare. We don't fall over, but the muscles have to contract very hard to stop you from falling over. In fact, the only people who don't fall over when they stand up and they pick something up perfectly is probably toddlers, because they're going to go down perfectly with fantastic posture. And you think, my God, do they know the essence of manual handling at that age when they're 18 months? No, of course they don't. The fact is, if they weren't balanced when they bent down, they would fall over. That's it. That's the only reason why they have really good posture when they're just starting to walk. So step stance allows us to move our line of gravity forward and backwards and sideways, which gives you a massive advantage. Next principle, in some ways.
Sorry, I think you might need to share your slides again.
Oh, Tristan. There we are. I told you to be busy this afternoon. Next principle is to hold the load close. Excuse me. So there's a direct mathematical formula which will tell you what happens if you hold something further away or closer. And I'm sure some of you may be familiar with it. And that's the principle of levers, where if you got a plank here, this brown thing was a plank and it's balanced on a fulcrum, which is that blue triangle. And only if it wasn't moving, there was no movement of that plank whatsoever, it was perfectly stationary, would the following be true: that the mass on one end multiplied by the distance to the fulcrum has to equal the mass on the other side multiplied by the distance. So the key to that is the muscle work you have to do is multiplied by distance. So it's not just added to by distance, it's multiplied by distance. So if you have a box or an object which is 6 inches away from you and you move it a foot away, then you're going to magnify the amount of force you need to generate absolutely hugely because of the multiplication factor. So there is a direct relationship between distance and the amount of work that your muscles has to do. So it makes sense to do that. So the next principle I'm going to talk about is to lean. Now this absolutely fascinates me. And it started, first inkling of this came to me when we've got a dog, or had a dog, bless her, she's now passed away. They used to lean against the stove that we've got, and she used to put a head in the ring towel over the rail on the stove and fall fast asleep, bang up against the stove, head in this towel thing. She used to spend hours there, and I couldn't quite work out what was going on. Well, she was just leaning. And the consequence of leaning, whether you lean or don't lean, can be really significant. The first thing is you can track and trace forces through as they travel through your body. So let's just talk about that a little bit, and then we'll go back to leaning. So we have a chap there who's taken his foot off the floor because he wants to be slimmer of the week, and he's in Slimming World. I don't know whether they actually do that in Slimming World, so I apologize. It's probably not correct. But anyway, he wants to lose weight. Has he lost weight? No, of course he hasn't. He weighs exactly the same. So he's lost no weight. But interestingly then, how's the weight of that shoe reaching the ground? Because it must be because it's still being weighed. If he had a set of scales under his right foot, the left shoe would still be being weighed. So how's it being weighed? Well, you can track and trace forces through the body. So the weight of the shoe is going up to his knee, then it's going up his femur, across his pelvis, down his other leg to the ground to be weighed underneath the right foot. So any forces in the body, you can trace how they travel through the body, and particularly with weight, this is true. It travels by the shortest possible route, and it goes through the skeletal system, basically. That's how your weight is reaching the ground, is traveling through the bones, and that's how that works. So you can track and trace forces of your weight. You can track and trace forces of your muscle work as well, which we'll talk about in a minute. So unfortunately, guys, you can't get rid of your weight. Not strictly speaking, you can't get rid of your weight. It's there and it's a constant. Well, it changes all the time, but basically it's a constant. You can divert your weight. Now that's the interesting thing. You can divert your weight so the weight of your body reaches the ground a different way. So I was just having a look at some of the people. Okay, I will stop the show. Please remind me to share my screen again. I'm now diverting the weight of my head. So the weight of my head is not traveling to the ground through my spine. It's now traveling to the ground through my hand, which is leaning against, down my forearm, through the table I'm leaning against, to the ground, that way. So I've now diverted the force of dealing with the weight of my head. It's now disappearing. It goes out of my body because it's traveling through my elbow and it's traveling through the table. Which is one of the reasons why, funnily enough, you fall asleep lying down. Have you ever thought about why you lie down to fall asleep? Well, it's interesting. You fall asleep generally lying down or recline back on a chair because your body weight, your body isn't having to deal with your body weight at all because it's all leaning against something. That's why it's so comfortable. I don't know if anyone can see Anthony there, but you're doing the same thing there, Anthony. You've got your hand resting on your chin, which is then traveling down your forearm. It's traveling through whatever it is it's leaning against, and then it's disappearing. So not only does your body weight disappear, but it reduces the amount of work your muscles are having to do. So let's have a look at that. So at the moment, I can't see you all because you've all got your videos turned off, which is fine. I understand why, because you're reducing the bandwidth, etc. But you've all got your hands leaning against something. I know. I can almost guarantee your hands are leaning against something. What's the advantage of having your hands leaning against something as they are at the moment? Not only is your body weight transferred through what you're leaning against, but the muscle work at your shoulder has been eliminated. Your shoulders aren't doing any work. They're just completely relaxed. So now take the weight of your hands off whatever it is you're leaning against. So just hold your hands up in the air. Somehow, just hover them. Well, not right up in the air, Joanne. Oh, that's surrender position. We don't have to do that. Just take them just hovering off what you're leaning against. Right, now you have to contract the muscles around the shoulders, dealing with the weight of your hands and arms. So if you lean, not only is your body weight transferred through something else, but the muscle work is considerably reduced. So I'll tell you a little tale. I have got a slight heart problem in that sometimes it doesn't behave itself and the rhythm of my heart goes a little bit haywire. So I've got tablets to deal with it. And I went to an arrhythmia clinic. Yep, they've got arrhythmia clinics. And I had a scan. I was having an ultrasound scan. And this girl was about to give me an ultrasound. I was laying down on my side, bare from the top down to the waist. And she was leaning over me with her hand and arm. And she was about to apply pressure to around about where my heart was, leaning right the way over. And the screen was miles away to her left. So she was really twisted, really awkward. And she had her hand and arm out. And I said, listen, I really need to get out more, but I can't stop thinking about how the forces are being generated in your hands, arms, shoulders, upper back, and everything like that. And I think you're under an awful lot of stress when you do this. She says, you know, yeah, my back starts to ache about 11 o'clock, something like that, and I can't wait for lunch. And then I have lunch, and it just about fades off again, and then it builds up again in the afternoon. And it doesn't go off till about 6 or 7 o'clock at night. Ah, I said. And how long have you been doing this? She said, well, I've only been doing it 3 or 4 years. I said, do you realize how much force your muscles are having to contract just by holding your arm up for those long periods of time? She says, no, I don't. I said, well, I'll tell you what, can you just go and get a pillow for me? So she rootled around. They're like gold dust in hospitals pillows. Anyway, she found one in an outpatient department. She found one. I said, right, just rest the pillow on my side. So she did. And now I said, just put your arm on the pillow and relax your arm completely. So don't let your arm take any weight, just completely relax your arm, and now start to do your ultrasound again. She went, oh, blimey, that's fantastic. So something as simple as that can reduce the amount of force your body's having to deal with just by leaning the weight of your hands and your arms. Now, the same applies with your body. So if you lean against the bed, then your body weight will disappear through the bed, and all that knock-on effect of the muscle contractures, which goes down and down, that ripple effect of all the muscles working, will stop wherever you're leaning against. So that stops it there and then, stops it in its tracks. So if you lean hard against the bed, that's why it feels so comfortable, because your body weight's going through and the muscles aren't working quite so hard. So if you can just utilize leaning in those simple ways, you could make a massive difference to the amount of force you have to generate. Lean against the bath if you're bathing somebody, if you can. And the height adjustable baths, which I'm sure Yorkshire Care have a wide variety of in their showrooms, give the carer a massive advantage is that you can lean against the bath because you can adjust it to a nice height for the carer, but you can lean against it. That's the reason why it's so effective. So leaning will divert forces and it reduces muscle work significantly. So let me just, oh, did you get that, Tristan? Look at that. Started to share at the right time. Okay, leaning, really important. A classic case of somebody diverting their body weight is when they use crutches. Classic. The weight still has to reach the ground, but this time the weight is reaching the ground through the arms, through the palm of the hands, down the crutches to the floor. If anyone has been unfortunate enough to be non-weight bearing on crutches, like you can't put either leg on the floor, if you've ever been in that scenario, it is agony. If you've used crutches and you're partially weight bearing on one leg, it is agony because all your body weight is traveling through the palm of your hands. Your hands are not designed to take your body weight, simply not. So that's another classic case of how you can get rid of your body weight in a way, divert it through a different way to reach the ground. We could use crutches or a stick, of course, sometimes they're used. So this is an anthropometric diagram or picture image of the average male upper arm. Now, as soon as I see that, I always have the thought, how on earth did they measure the weight of an upper arm? Did they amputate it and stick it on a set of scales, or what did they, how did they get that? I don't know. Somebody might be able to inform me how you can measure the weight of somebody's arm in that way. Anyway, they have done. So the average weight of a male human arm is 4.5 kilograms. So if you've got any kilogram of weight, if you multiply it by 10, that will give you the force it generates. That's in newtons. And he was the guy who sat under a tree, an apple hit him on the head, and he thought, why is that doing? It must be gravity. He didn't invent gravity, of course. The average length of the average male human arm is 0.6 of a meter. Now, I can understand how they got that measurement. Just got a tape measure, but the previous one I'm a bit perplexed by. So weight multiplied by distance will give you the forces which need to be generated at the shoulder joint. So don't get too perplexed by the numbers. I would just ask you to consider that final number, which is 27 Newton meters. So I wouldn't worry about that. So that's the forces. Holding the weight of your arm out to the side, that's the forces the shoulder joint, the shoulder muscles have to generate. So what happens now if we rest the elbow on something, lean the elbow against something? So how does that transform everything? Well, it transforms it quite dramatically in the fact that now there is no force having to be generated at the shoulders because the weight of the arm is leaning against this block here, this purple block. So the only force that needs to be generated now is by the forearm muscles, which have to hold the weight of the lower arm up. And the force generated is a quarter of what it was previously. So if you can lean the weight of your hand or arm on something, you will significantly reduce the amount of work the muscles have to do. I tried many years ago now to get theatre staff who were holding holding cameras during an operation. They've got to hold the hand virtually out, arms outstretched with a camera inside a body cavity, while the surgeon does bits and pieces, and they're there for a long time. It's absolutely agony for them to try and get them with a gutter frame on the side of the operating table so they could rest their arm on that. While their arm was on it, it was significantly relieved. They were able to do their job for much longer, hold the camera more accurately, and one thing and another. However, the pole and the gutter just seemed to get in the way for some reason, so they didn't actually take it up, which was a real shame. I think I've got my my Dragon's Den, by the way, my project for the Dragon's Den, which you may see at some stage, and that is theatre staff's special scrubs. And what they have, they're massive pockets in them. So inside those pockets, you can fit nice gel pads. So in fact, they can start to lean against the edge of the operating table and take all the pressure off the bodies, both the body weight and the muscle work will be reduced, because they can't lean against it at the moment because it's so uncomfortable because there's metal bars there. So my idea is to have these scrubs with these gel pockets in them. I think I'll make a fortune. So if I hear of any products in that field related in the next 12 months, then I'll know you got it here at the Yorkshire Care Seminar. So fulcrum movement. Classic case of leaning, where the lady there is leaning the weight of her head, so the weight of her head's traveling down her forearm. The muscles of the neck will be relaxed because they're not having to do as much work, which is why it feels so comfortable. The reason why those people who have really acute neck pain will have a neck brace is because the whole weight of the head will be supported on the neck brace, and it goes through to the collarbones. Therefore, the muscles will be completely relaxed. And one of the big problems with acute neck pain is the muscles go into sheet contraction, which actually aggravates all the problems. So that's another one. So diverting forces. Let's have a look at this. We've talked about it a little bit. What I'd like you to do is just to stand up for me, if that's okay. So if you'd like to stand up. Come on, Anthony. You're just the only one I can see, Anthony, that's all. Right. Okay, we're going to divert forces, and I'm going to make you much stronger. Now, the two ladies are working together. You can work as a pair here, and this will be even better. I would like you to hold up the weight of your right arm away from your side. Can you do that for me? Just at your side, so you've got it at your side like that, but it's out to the side. Can you see what I'm doing there? Just hold the weight, all right? And then I want you to press down as hard as you can with your other hand and just see what happens. And you're very not stable and you're not very strong. Now, the two people are working together there. If one of you presses down on the other person's hands, Joanne, with the arm out to the side, and now feel the difference if you just anchor in that forearm or you anchor in your elbow and then you press down, you have a completely different sensation of strength, because your forces are diverted along your forearm. Wherever your forearm is in contact with your side, it then travels through your side down your leg. That's taking all the stress and strain away from your shoulder. So if you're carrying anything or holding anything, lean the arm. Don't have the weight close, but lean the arm against your side. Have some contact with that arm or elbow against your side. The forces will be diverted through your side down to the ground. If you have ever had kids, have some of you had kids who are now a little bit older? I'm sure some of you had. How did you carry them when they were toddlers? Very good. Perched on top of your hip. Brilliant. Now that's an ace bit of leaning. So their body weight is leaning directly through your hip, so it travels through your hip to the ground. Very good. Legs either side of the hip, is that right? Something like that. Trunk leaning against you, so their weight of their trunk is leaning against your trunk, so it's traveling through the trunk that way. So in fact, you're not doing very much with your shoulders at all at the moment. If the weight of the head is leaning against your upper shoulder, then that's where the weight of the head is going. So in fact, your shoulder is doing very little muscle work. It's just contact. The weight is contacting you and traveling through your body that way. So if you're carrying or holding anything, lean it against you. Make sure some part of that weight is leaning against you, and then it'll be diverted through your body. Okay. I've almost remembered. Right, here we go. Principle, nose and toes. It's called many things. Don't twist. You may see somewhere. However, there's nothing wrong with twisting. Your body desperately needs to twist. However, if you want to work really smartly and efficiently, the main muscles that drive your body, the big main muscles, the muscles of your thighs, the muscles of your hips, the muscle of your glutei, the muscles around your stomach, the muscles at the back of your leg, they're all designed to move you forwards. That's what they're basically designed for, which is why we walk. We walk forwards. We don't generally walk backwards, and we definitely don't walk sideways. So the muscle system of a crab is very different to our muscle system because they walk sideways and we walk forwards. So it's not that it will cause you harm if you twist, because it won't. It's just not very effective. If you have your nose and toes and your shoulders and hips, everything facing in exactly the same direction, then you're able to utilize your biggest, strongest muscles most effectively by not twisting. So that's why we have some sort of indication there. It's better if you can to have everything facing forward, because that's your big, strong muscles ready to go. Last principle. This is when you want to generate a force. Now, there are times when it doesn't matter, like I described earlier on right at the start of this, where if you're just giving minimal assistance to get somebody out of a chair, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if you're a little bit twisted, because actually the force you generate is so little, it doesn't really matter. But now we're talking about potentially you're going to be generating a lot more force. So maybe the person in that chair in that diagram wasn't very able and now weighed 20 stone. Pushed back into extension when they came up into standing, and you've got to get them out of the chair. You may need to develop quite a lot of force. If you're on your own and in the community and you've got to move somebody up the bed, and you need to move their body weight up and across the bed, and you need to push their body weight or pull their body weight up the bed under a slide sheet or an in-bed system, which Yorkshire Care has loads of, then that means you need to get closer to these principles because you'll be more efficient. And sinking down puts everything in mid-range. All the biggest muscles are in their best ergonomic position to generate a force. So if you lower down with your hips and your knees and you sink down, it means those muscles are better able. So for instance, there's a lady here who's got a barbell. The whole biceps muscle is stronger when the elbow is about 90 degrees bent. That's mid-range. So that's what I'm talking about. When the arm goes down and hangs down by the side and it's vertical, the muscle is not so strong. In fact, it's significantly weaker. You can't move the same sort of weight at that point. And if the arm is nearly up to the shoulder, again, you can't really generate much force. So all your muscles are stronger in mid-range. So that's where we want them. And what you'll find is that if you did try and generate a lot of force, you'd do this naturally. You would sink down to generate more force. So I'm going to ask you to do a little exercise in a second, once I've got this lock bit. If you try and move your hands away from your body or towards your body, so if your hands actually move, you must have generated the force with your shoulders. Fact. Your shoulders and your upper arm muscles must have generated that force. So locking, to become really ergonomic and efficient and effective when you're handling, means you don't even attempt to move your hands or arms towards or away from your body or lift them up or lower them down. They just remain in the same position. Some people find that position almost fully straight with the elbows, some maybe bent a little bit more. Whatever position they start in, leave them in that position and don't try and move them. Okay. If you've got a bit of wall space free, if anybody got a little bit of wall space, filing cabinet, something like that, maybe free. Right, I'd like you to pretend in a minute that you're going to go up to the wall or the filing cabinet, and if you push really hard against it, you could actually move the wall or you could move the filing cabinet. If you generated enough force, you could do it. Can you just do that for me now? So you're going to go up to something which is immovable, but if you really generated a lot of force, you could move it, and just crack on and we'll see what sort of position you're in. Okay, so you can be pushing as hard as you can. Perfect. George, don't move, just keep pushing. You need to push harder, George. You might get the wall moving a little bit. Right, perfect. If you did that, you'd be in a step stance position. You would. You have to be in a step stance. You can't do that with your feet together. You're in a step stance position. Your nose and toes will be facing forward. Your shoulders will be facing forward. Your hips will be facing forward. You'll be sinking down. You'll be sinking down. You'll be locking your hands and arms and your elbows, and you'll be trying to push with your leg muscles. That's exactly how you would do it. That's a perfect example of getting close to the principles if you have to generate an awful lot of force. So to try and lock your hands and your arms, which is really counterintuitive. It's counterintuitive because whenever we've got anything, we want to pull and push with our hands and arms. That's what we've been doing all our lives. But to generate much more force, we don't. Okay. And the last thing, so this lady is actually demonstrating a handstand press up. So how many people could do a handstand press up? I'm not going to ask you, George. It may be a disaster. Could anybody do a handstand press up? Okay, if I asked you to get on, if theoretically, if you could get into a handstand, I want you to walk across the room on your arms. Could you do that? No. Your arms are not designed to generate a lot of force, really. Your legs are. So to generate the force with your legs rather than your arms will make you much more efficient. It's a much smarter way to generate a force, to use your legs, which are used to generating a lot of force, rather than your arms, which aren't. That's a lady doing exactly the same thing in effect as a handstand press up. She's raising and lowering her total body weight, but using her legs. Everybody could do that because that's what your legs do. So when you're doing manual hand, you should think legs, not arms. And if you think of that, you'll be somewhere on your way to generating the most effective force you possibly can. During my teaching, when I'm talking about forces, I often mentioned that the force you generate needs to be as close as you possibly need to be to the force that you want to generate in the first place. So if you're pushing somebody across the bed, the force you need to generate needs to be across the bed, not pushing them into the bed or lifting them up. And that depends very much on the angle of your forearms. If your forearms are parallel with the surface of the bed, the force you generate will be parallel. Perfect. That's what you want to do if you want to move them across the bed. Is a perfect example of these ladies in a tug of war team wanting to generate an awful lot of force. Their arms aren't actually moving. Their arms are just locked onto the rope. They're not trying to pull the rope towards them when they're doing the tug of war. Their arms are just locked. If you see the angle of the forearms of the first two ladies, it's directly, exactly the same line as the rope. Therefore, the force they generate will be along the line of the rope, not lifting the rope up or lowering the rope down. It will be exactly parallel, therefore very effective. And how do they generate the force? They generate the force using the legs. Their legs stamp up and down, and a really good team, they'll time it all together and they'll win really easily. So they're leaning back, they're just using the legs, and their arms are virtually locked. Very interesting. Now, I don't expect that you'll ever want to teach any of your staff to lift any weight or box like this guy's about to lift this bar. I really don't. That would be ridiculous. This is a world champion weightlifter. So nobody of his weight category has ever lifted more weight, ever, in the world. So he must be the most ergonomically effective and smartest weightlifter there has ever been. So let's have a look at some of the principles that he's adopting, which will match up to some of the things we've talked about. So I'll just see if this will set off now. We might get an advert if we're lucky. Nope. It's called a clean and jerk. The thing he's about to do is a clean and jerk. So it's going to move around so you can see the position he's in. Right. His elbows are straight. He's not going to even try and bend his elbows. He's not. His elbows are going to stay absolutely straight. He's not going to use his arms to lift up the weight. He's not going to use his arm. He's going to use his really powerful back muscles, which are going to push the flexed spine there up into a neutral position so it's square on. He's going to use his massive thigh and buttock muscles to lift up the weight first off before he tries to do anything with his arms. He's not going to do anything. And the shape of his spine is all in the neutral position. So the curves of the spine are all there. So everything's in a neutral position. So let's have a look at this. So he's about to explode into action any second now. Just watch this. It'll do it all in slow motion again, and I talk through it. Right, here we go, slow motion. Right, his elbows haven't bent. He's not tried to move his hands or arms upwards yet. He's getting the momentum of the bar to allow the bar to get beyond his hips, where then it's got momentum, it's already continuing to raise, and then he's going to bring his arms into action at that point there. Not until that point will he do it. His back starts to straighten up, which is generating an awful lot of force, which is lifting up the bar as well. If you have a look at his feet, he's generating so much force, his feet actually come off the floor. And then he's leaning the weight of the bar against his collarbones. So we know by leaning, that means the weight of the bar is traveling through the collarbones. He's giving his muscles a rest. His muscles aren't doing anything because the bar is leaning directly against his collarbones. So that is incredibly positive. That gives him that little moment's respite before he goes on to the next stage. Now, again, what you're going to see now for his last little bit, which is the jerk bit, he's going to bend down and use his legs to generate the propulsion to lift the bar up. He's not going to even try and move the bar with his arms. And when the bar has gone up far enough because he's using his legs, he will straighten his arms while the bar is still in the air and not in contact with his arms. He'll straighten his arms in one clean snap, which is quite amazing, really. But that's how he raises it. He doesn't try and use his arms. He uses all the rest of his body, his really strong leg muscles, to lift up the bar. Here we go. There we go, just one last time. And this last bit is just amazing. The disadvantage of not being in a step stance, he wants to go up and down, not forward and back, but he's very finely balanced with his feet level. And if you'll notice, when he comes down onto the ground, he very nearly overbalances backwards, which wouldn't have happened if he was in the step stance position, but he wouldn't have been able to lift the weight if he was. But it's just one of the things which is more difficult. There we go, he almost goes backwards. Oh, there he goes, no he doesn't. So, right. So like I said, I wouldn't expect you to teach anybody to lift anything up in that way. It'll be clearly ridiculous. However, the closer you get to maximum effort, the closer you need to be to working really smart and efficiently by following the principles which I've just outlined. And the same principles would apply whether you're moving somebody across the bed, getting them out of the chair, using a slide sheet system, pushing a wheelchair, pushing a bed. Exactly the same principles would apply. Okay, I think I've finished my PowerPoint. There we go. And it's 10 to 3. Have we got any questions, George?
Thank you, Simon. Apologies, I was just struggling to mute there. Yes, there's a few come in, and feel free, everyone, to keep feeding the questions in while we've got Simon with us. So I'll just touch on these 2 or 3 first of all, which were kind of product related, and then
Oh yeah, fine.
feed in any of the more technical ones, Simon, will be coming your way. So somebody asked in relation to the R20 power pack, which I showed, how does that get added to the standard wheelchair? It's actually one of the easiest, I would say, on the market to actually fix on, take off. Very minimal, tools required. You've got like the battery pack, which hangs on the back of the handles, and then the motorized wheel just sits in between the two wheels of the wheelchair, and it also can fold with the wheelchair, which is fantastic. It's one of the only few power packs I know that do that. Now, we had a question as well from Catherine. Is there a lower or similar weight limit for the carbon fiber equipment? Which is a great question, because with a lot of very, very lightweight metals, they're often not as strong as, but I feel they're starting to crack it with the carbon fiber. That particular relator that I showed had a 23.5 stone weight limit, which would be similar to your other standard relators on the market. The same goes for the wheelchairs as well. So like the active user wheelchairs, which are available in carbon fiber, even crutches, walking sticks, they would all hold a similar weight limit to standard equipment. So definitely worth considering, because it is a very, very lightweight metal. Now, just first one for you, Simon. This isn't so much of a question, but I definitely think it's worth reading out and sharing with others on the call. So Jonathan puts, as a physio, more and more I find myself using forearm style walking aids for a lot of my older clients with mobility difficulties, joint restrictions and muscle weakness, in order to reduce effort and improve mobility. Your principle of leaning and the diversion of forces perfectly explains why this is easier for my clients and helps my understanding more. So I thought that was definitely worth considering. Yeah. We found, I think, recently over the past few months, that we've been supplying more of those type of forearm style walking aids. I think patients as well get a more stable, probably feel more secure in terms of the walk, and as you say, it's you're distributing your weight really more evenly. I don't know whether you wanted to add anything to that.
No, it just means it reduces all the forces having to be generated in the forearm, and certainly if you've got elbow problems, the forces will be transmitted directly through from the shoulder straight through to the gutter part of the crutch, for instance. Therefore, there's much less force that needs to be generated, and it's a lot more comfortable.
Yeah. Question here from Francis. We always advise carers not to twist their backs. Would you say this is not so important?
Okay, it depends what they're doing. If they're it's impossible to. If they generate a lot of force and they're twisting, that's not the smartest, most efficient way to do it. You're more efficient by not twisting, and you're keeping everything square on. You generate the force with the big muscles more effectively if you're not twisting. Just to twist is absolutely fine, but to twist if it's very repetitive is also not particularly smart. Or if you're twisting and then you're maintaining a static posture for a long period, that's not particularly smart or efficient either. But the general movement of twisting without much stress on it is fine. It's what your body needs to do. So it depends what they're doing when they're twisting.
So Francis just added to that, when moving and handling, e.g. when hoisting or doing cares on the bed.
Right, if you're generating a lot of force and you're twisting, there are more efficient ways of doing it. That's all I'd say. And I would, when I'm teaching, I give people options. So if you're generating more force, you really need to be thinking more closely to the principles, abiding by the principles more closely, because you're just more efficient. But then again, there's always some people who feel really comfortable in a slightly twisted position. Like if they're getting somebody out of a chair, they aren't completely square on, that feels slightly alien to them. And they'll naturally just twist a little bit, then start to look at, well, hang on, are they twisting and twisting further as they're generating the force? Are they keeping that same amount of twist as they're generating the force with their legs? And that's completely different. So hard to say. You would need to see what they were doing. As a general rule of thumb, I would argue that they're not generating much force. Don't worry about it. And if they are, let's be a little bit more careful.
That's helpful. Thank you. Covers that well. And just to answer Nicole, she just put a question in the chat. Yes, the recording of the session will be available, so that's no problem at all. I think, unless I've missed anything, that's all the questions one's just come in. What can be done to protect ourselves from the pressures the client puts on us for leaning?
Okay, don't let them lean against you, because it's usually unnecessary. And I certainly noticed that if I offer somebody support and they start to lean on me, then they'll lean harder and harder. Whereas if I take the support away, often they straighten up and they stop leaning. So I wouldn't want somebody to lean against anybody if you're supporting them in walking. Really, there should be no need. You're not a Zimmer frame or you're not a stick. You're a very expensive human carer, and you shouldn't be lent on in that way. And like I say, if you do remove the support away, often the person will straighten up and not actually take so much of their body weight against you anyway. But there should be no need, really.
Again, that's helpful. Thank you, Simon. So I think just before we wrap up, we have just really wanted to point, as we do each time, to the website where we've got a lot of free resources on there. Quite a bit on moving and handling, a lot on seating. If there's any justifications or recent, maybe videos such as these times or previous training events, we've got a lot of resource on there. So I just really encourage you to jump on there, use the resource. It's yours, it's free. And just really to wrap up, I guess, the year. Thank you for those of you that have joined us on the webinars that we've carried out this year. We're looking to continue those. Really big thank you, Simon. I feel bad for you I hope you feel better, as I think everybody's adding in the in the chat comments now. And really would wish all a great break. Merry Christmas, and we'll see you all in the new year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, George.
Cheers, Simon.
Bye.